A single plate of handmade gnocchi, bathed in a simple sage butter sauce, sits on a cold, marble countertop. For 23-year-old waitress Audrey Bell, this dish was a memory of love, of laughter, of a time before her life became a frantic race against overdue bills and her little brother's mounting medical expenses. She had no idea that by sharing this simple memory with a broken-hearted girl at table 7, she was about to ignite a chain of events that would shatter a billion-dollar dynasty. This isn't a fairy tale of a waitress meeting a prince. It's the story of how one act of kindness plunged a young woman into a world of dark secrets, unimaginable wealth, and a life-altering choice that would force her to confront the true price of compassion. The air in Trattoria Valenti was thick with the scent of money and garlic. On a Thursday night, the low-lit dining room hummed with the self-important chatter of Chicago's elite. For Audrey Bell, it was just another shift, another 8 hours of smiling through the ache in her feet and the gnawing anxiety in her gut. Her worn-out, non-slip shoes, a size too big and padded with drugstore insoles, were a constant reminder of the tightrope she walked. Every perfectly plated dish of risotto, every uncorked bottle of expensive Barolo was a countdown to the first of the month, when her rent was due. A countdown to the next call from the collections department of the hospital, where her 10-year-old brother, Leo, was undergoing another round of grueling treatments for a rare autoimmune disorder. The doctors used long, complicated words, but Audrey understood them in the simplest terms. They were expensive, catastrophically expensive. "Audrey, table 7 is yours, the Davenports. Be sharp," muttered her manager, Frank, without looking up from his reservation screen. Audrey straightened her black apron, forcing a practiced, pleasant smile onto her face. The Davenports. Even she knew that name. Lawrence Davenport was a titan of industry, a man who built a logistics empire from a single truck and now moved a significant percentage of the world's goods. His face was a fixture in business journals, always looking stern, powerful, and untouchable. She approached the table with a pitcher of iced water, her waitress senses on high alert. The man himself was exactly as advertised. Sharp suit, steel grey hair, a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite. His eyes, however, held a deep, weary sadness that no photograph had ever captured. Across from him sat a woman who could only be his wife. She was flawlessly elegant, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, a string of pearls glowing against her skin. Her name was Genevieve, Audrey recalled from a society page glimpse. She smiled, a bright, brittle thing that didn't reach her cool, calculating eyes. And then there was the girl. Lily Davenport was perhaps 16 or 17, but she looked younger and infinitely more fragile. She was swimming in an expensive-looking silk blouse, her wrists like tiny bird bones. Her face, which should have been vibrant with youth, was pale and gaunt, dominated by enormous, haunted blue eyes. A ghost at the feast. Anorexia wasn't just a clinical term when you saw it this close. It was a palpable presence, a thief that had stolen the light from this child. "Good evening. My name is Audrey, and I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you with something to drink besides water?" Audrey asked, her voice calm and even. Lawrence ordered a scotch. Neat. Genevieve, a sparkling water with a twist of lime, her eyes flicking over Audrey's uniform with faint disapproval. Lily said nothing, her gaze fixed on the pristine white tablecloth. "And for the young lady?" Audrey prompted gently. "She'll have a water as well," Genevieve answered for her, a little too quickly. "We're trying to encourage her to stay hydrated." The words were sweet, but the subtext felt sharp. The ordering process was a miniature psychodrama. Lawrence ordered the osso buco without even looking at the menu. Genevieve inquired about the caloric content of the sea bass versus the scallops, her voice dripping with faux concern. "It's so hard to find options that are both delicious and responsible," she sighed, patting Lily's hand. Lily flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. When it was Lily's turn, a tense silence fell over the table. "Lily, darling," Lawrence said, his deep voice softened. "The gnocchi here is very good. Light. You always liked that." Lily shook her head, a barely there motion. She wouldn't look at him. She wouldn't look at anyone. "Perhaps just a small salad, with the dressing on the side," Genevieve suggested, her tone the auditory equivalent of a pair of tweezers. Again, a shake of the head. Audrey felt a familiar pang in her chest. It wasn't pity. It was a raw, aching empathy that reminded her of Leo on his bad days, when the pain was too much and he would refuse the broth she'd spent hours simmering, turning his face to the wall. It was the look of someone who had surrendered. I'll decide later," Lily whispered, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. Audrey simply nodded. "Of course. I'll give you some more time." She retreated to the kitchen, the family's silent, heavy drama clinging to her. She put in the orders for the parents and watched as the chefs, artists of fire and flavor, began their work. All this food, all this craft and passion, meant to bring joy and sustenance. And at that table, it was a weapon, a source of fear and control. When she returned with the appetizers, the tension had thickened. Genevieve was scrolling through her phone, a picture of detached boredom. Lawrence was staring at his daughter, his face a mask of helpless anguish. Lily was meticulously folding and refolding her napkin into smaller and smaller, sharper squares. Audrey served the adults, and then turned to Lily. This was against every rule of service Frank had ever drilled into her. But she couldn't help it. The sight of the girl's trembling hands, the desperate emptiness in her eyes, broke through Audrey's professional armor. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so only Lily could hear. "You know," she said softly, "my grandmother taught my little brother and me how to make gnocchi when we were kids. She'd let us roll the dough on the back of a fork to get the little ridges. She always said the ridges weren't for looks. They were little pockets to hold the sauce and the love." Lily's hands stilled. Her eyes, for the first time, flickered up to meet Audrey's. Audrey continued, the memory warm and real. "My brother, he gets sick sometimes, and he doesn't want to eat. But he'll always eat the gnocchi. He says he's not eating the potato or the flour. He's eating Grandma's hugs." She paused, offering a small, genuine smile. "Our chef makes it just like she did. It's very soft. Just little pillows. No pressure. I just wanted you to know." She straightened up and walked away without waiting for a response, her heart pounding. She had crossed a line. She'd probably get fired. A Davenport could complain, and that would be the end of her job, the end of the line for Leo's next treatment payment. She busied herself at other tables, her mind racing. But from the corner of her eye, she watched table 7. She saw Lawrence put his hand over his wife's, a clear signal to be quiet. She saw him speak to Lily, his voice low and earnest. And then she saw it. The smallest of miracles. Lily gave a slow, hesitant nod. Lawrence caught Audrey's eye from across the room and gave her a look of such profound, desperate gratitude that it almost buckled her knees. He gestured for her to come over. "My daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "would like to try the gnocchi." When Audrey placed the small bowl in front of Lily, it felt less like serving food and more like a sacred offering. The table was silent. Genevieve watched with a tight, unreadable expression. Lawrence held his breath. Lily stared at the bowl for a long, agonizing minute. Then she picked up her fork. She nudged one of the dumplings, separating it from the others. She lifted it, her hand shaking slightly. She brought it to her lips, and she ate it. Just one. She set the fork down, a single tear tracing a path down her pale cheek, but she had eaten it. She had chosen to. Lawrence's shoulders slumped in relief, the tension draining out of his powerful frame. He looked at Audrey, and in that moment, he wasn't a billionaire titan. He was just a father who had been given a sliver of hope. The rest of the meal was quiet. Lily didn't eat another bite, but she didn't fold her napkin either. She simply sat, her hands resting in her lap. When Audrey cleared the table, Lawrence insisted on paying the bill directly with her. He handed her his credit card. When she brought back the slip, he signed it, folded it, and placed it firmly in her hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I don't know what you said to her, but thank you." Audrey just nodded, unable to speak. It wasn't until she was clearing the last of her tables at the end of the night that she looked at the receipt. The bill was for $487.50. The tip he had written in was for $5,000. Audrey stared at the number, her vision blurring. It was more than 2 months' rent. It was the co-pay for Leo's next infusion. It was a life raft. She sank onto a stool in the service corridor, the paper trembling in her hand, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to cry. Not from despair, but from a dizzying, terrifying surge of hope. She thought it was the money that was changing her life. She had no idea the real change hadn't even begun. The next day, Audrey felt like she was walking on air. The $5,000 felt like a shield against the world. She'd paid her rent, scheduled Leo's next hospital payment, and even bought him the expensive Lego set he'd been staring at in a catalogue for months. For the first time in a long time, she breathed without a weight on her chest. She arrived at Trattoria Valenti for her afternoon shift feeling renewed. The sun was hitting the Chicago streets, making the glass on the skyscrapers glitter. "Bell! Front and center!" Frank barked the moment she walked in. His usual scowl was replaced by a look of bewilderment. "Someone's here to see you." Audrey's stomach tightened. A customer complaint? Did Genevieve decide to report her for being too familiar? But the man waiting in the empty dining room wasn't a disgruntled customer. It was Lawrence Davenport. He was standing by table 7, looking out the window, his hands clasped behind his back. In the daylight, without the power dining armor, he looked older, more tired, but no less imposing. "Mr. Davenport," Audrey said, her voice barely a whisper. "Is everything all right?" He turned to face her, his gaze intense. "That's what I'm here to find out, Miss Bell. Please, sit." He gestured to the chair Lily had occupied. Audrey sat hesitantly, her hands twisting the strap of her tote bag. Being a guest at a table where she normally served was deeply disorienting. "Last night," he began, his voice direct and devoid of pleasantries, "was the first time in 11 months that my daughter has willingly eaten a bite of food that wasn't prescribed by a doctor or forced down her in a clinical setting." Audrey was speechless. 11 months! "We have the best doctors, the top nutritionists, the most renowned therapists from here to Switzerland," he continued, a note of bitter frustration in his voice. "They have protocols, meal plans, behavioral therapies. They have everything. But you have something they don't." "Sir, I told her a story about my grandma," Audrey stammered. "It was nothing. It was everything," he corrected her sharply. "You didn't see her as a case file. You saw a person. You connected with her. I don't know how, but you did. You gave her a reason to take that bite, a reason that wasn't about calories or weight or control. It was about a hug from a grandmother. He pulled a chair out and sat opposite her, leaning forward, his forearms on the table. The full force of his focus was on her, and it was overwhelming. I'm not a man who beats around the bush, Miss Bell. I'm here to offer you a job. Audrey blinked. A job? Sir, I'm a waitress. I'm also studying social work part-time online, but I've already had my people look into you, he said, cutting her off. He wasn't unkind, just efficient. Audrey Bell, 23, student at the University of Illinois, Chicago, online program. Your brother, Leo Bell, is currently a patient at Mercy Children's Hospital. The prognosis is difficult. The costs are astronomical. Audrey felt a chill go down her spine. He had laid her entire life bare on the table in less than 60 seconds. The shield she felt from the $5,000 tip suddenly felt paper-thin. What I'm offering isn't a waitressing job, he said. I want you to be a companion for Lily, to live at our estate, to simply be there for her, to talk to her, eat with her, or at least sit with her during meals, to be the person who sees her, and not her condition. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Live with them? In the Davenport estate? It was a place rumored to have its own zip code. I'm not qualified, she said, the words feeling clumsy and small. I'm not a doctor or a therapist. I have a full-time staff of those, he countered. They're failing. You succeeded. I'm not asking you to cure her, Miss Bell. I'm asking you to be a friend, a real one. He slid a heavy cream-colored envelope across the table. Her name was typed on the front. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was a formal employment contract. She scanned the terms, her eyes widening at the numbers until they felt like they were going to pop out of her head. The salary was $300,000 a year. A separate clause stated that all medical expenses, current and future, for her brother Leo Bell would be covered in their entirety by a private Davenport family fund. No limits. No questions asked. Audrey's breath hitched. This wasn't a life raft. This was a fleet of golden ships, a new ocean, a different world. It was the end of every single one of her worries. Leo could have the best care, the experimental treatments they couldn't afford, the 24/7 specialist attention he needed. She wouldn't have to choose between textbooks and his prescriptions ever again. But a cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. It felt too good to be true. A deal with the devil, perhaps. What about your wife? Audrey asked, thinking of Genevieve's cold eyes. A shadow crossed Lawrence's face. My wife agrees this is a necessary step. She wants what's best for Lily. The statement felt rehearsed, hollow. Your primary point of contact will be me. You will report only to me. He was offering her a golden cage, a beautiful, luxurious prison, where her only job was to save a girl who might not want to be saved, all while navigating a family dynamic that felt like a minefield. I need to think about it, she said, her voice shaking. Of course, he said, standing up. I'll give you 24 hours. A car will be waiting for you outside this restaurant tomorrow at noon. If you get in, you accept the offer. If you don't, I'll understand, and you'll never hear from me again. He gave her a curt nod and walked out, leaving Audrey alone in the silent dining room, the contract feeling like it weighed 100 pounds in her lap. She didn't finish her shift. She called Frank, told him she was sick, and took the L train back to her tiny apartment. The whole way, the city outside seemed like a movie she was no longer a part of. She called her best friend and fellow waitress, Jenna. Are you insane? Take it! Jenna shrieked through the phone after Audrey explained the situation. 300 grand? And they'll pay for Leo's treatment? Audrey, this is the answer to your prayers. Who cares if the stepmom is a witch? You can handle her. You handle a dozen witches every Saturday night brunch shift. Jenna was right, on the surface. But her friend didn't see the haunted look in Lily's eyes. She didn't feel the chilling efficiency with which Lawrence Davenport had investigated her life. This wasn't just a job. It was an entanglement. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, looking at the brick wall of the building next door, the contract open on her coffee table. She thought of Lily, alone in a mansion, starving for something that had nothing to do with food. She thought of Leo, his small face pale against the hospital pillow, his bravery in the face of constant pain. Saving one could mean saving the other. But what would it cost her? Her freedom? Her identity? Would she become just another one of the Davenports' expensive acquisitions? The morning light crept into her apartment, grey and uncertain. Noon felt like a deadline for the rest of her life. She dressed not in her waitress uniform, but in her nicest pair of jeans and a simple sweater. She packed a small overnight bag, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. At 11:58 a.m., she was standing on the corner outside Trattoria Valenti. The street was busy, loud and familiar. Her world. Precisely at noon, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. The back door opened with a quiet, hydraulic hiss. The interior was dark, cool, and silent. It was an invitation to another reality. Taking one last look at the life she knew, Audrey took a deep breath, stepped off the curb, and got into the car. The door closed behind her, shutting out the noise of the city. As the car pulled silently into traffic, she knew, with terrifying certainty, that her life had just changed forever. The Davenport estate wasn't just a house, it was a kingdom. Located in a wealthy suburb north of Chicago, it was hidden from the road by a formidable stone wall and a dense forest of ancient oak trees. The black sedan passed through iron gates that opened with silent, deferential obedience and crunched up a long, winding driveway. Audrey stared out the window, her knuckles white on the strap of her bag. The main house came into view, a sprawling limestone mansion that looked more like a European museum than a family home. Manicured lawns rolled out like green carpets, dotted with sculptures and fountains that glittered in the afternoon sun. The car stopped under a grand portico. A uniformed driver opened her door, and another man, equally stoic and dressed in a butler's attire, took her single bag. "Welcome to Arden Hill, Miss Bell. Mr. Davenport is waiting for you in his study." The inside of the house was even more intimidating than the outside. The foyer had a soaring ceiling, a marble floor that echoed her nervous footsteps, and a chandelier that looked like a cascade of frozen diamonds. The air was cool, still, and smelled faintly of lemon oil and old money. It was achingly beautiful and completely sterile. There were no stray magazines, no shoes by the door, no sign that people actually lived here. She was led down a long hall, lined with dark, imposing portraits of Davenport ancestors. Each pair of painted eyes seemed to follow her, questioning her presence. Finally, the butler opened a pair of massive oak doors. Lawrence Davenport was behind a desk the size of Audrey's entire kitchen. The room was lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked like they had never been opened. "Audrey, thank you for coming," he said, rising from his chair. He didn't smile, but his eyes held a flicker of relief. "I trust the journey was comfortable." "Yes, thank you, Mr. Davenport." "Please call me Lawrence, and you are Audrey." He gestured to a leather armchair. "Let's go over the ground rules. Your role here is fluid. Your goal is to be a positive presence for Lily. You'll have a suite of rooms in the East Wing, adjacent to hers. All your needs will be met. You have access to the grounds, the library, the pool, the home theatre. You are a guest here, but you are also an employee. Discretion is paramount. What happens in this house stays in this house. His tone was grave, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The last sentence hung in the air, a clear warning. My wife, Genevieve, will be your point of contact for day-to-day household matters, he continued, a slight tightening around his mouth. But on all matters concerning Lily, you answer to me, and only me. Is that clear? Yes, crystal clear, Audrey said. Good. Mrs. Gable, our head housekeeper, will show you to your rooms. Lily is with her afternoon tutor. You'll meet her at dinner tonight. 7 p.m. sharp. Dress code is smart. Casual. Mrs. Gable was a woman who seemed to be made entirely of sharp angles and disapproval. With her grey hair pulled into a severe bun and a posture that could straighten a slouched pipe, she led Audrey through a labyrinth of silent hallways. Your suite, Miss Bell, she announced, opening a door. Audrey stepped inside and forgot to breathe. Her suite was larger than her entire Chicago apartment, a spacious living room with a fireplace, a bedroom with a canopied bed, and a marble bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. A set of French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking a breathtakingly beautiful rose garden. It was a princess's chamber. It felt utterly wrong. Your personal items will be laundered daily. The kitchen staff has been instructed to accommodate any dietary requests you may have. Dinner is at 7, Mrs. Gable stated, her voice devoid of any warmth. She looked Audrey up and down, her gaze lingering on Audrey's jeans. I've taken the liberty of having a stylist send over a few appropriate items for your wardrobe. They are in the closet. With that, she turned and left, closing the door with a soft but definitive click. Audrey was alone. She walked over to the closet and opened it. It was filled with beautiful, expensive clothes, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, all in her size. It was a thoughtful gesture that felt more like a uniforming. They weren't just giving her a job, they were curating her existence. That evening, Audrey dressed in a pair of the new navy trousers and a cream-colored silk shirt. She felt like an imposter playing dress-up. She made her way to the cavernous dining room, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm. The scene was an unnerving echo of the restaurant, only colder and more intimate. Lawrence sat at the head of the long, polished table. Genevieve sat to his right, radiant in an emerald green dress. And Lily sat opposite her, looking even smaller and more lost than she had before. A fourth place was set for Audrey, next to Lily. Audrey, so glad you could join us, Genevieve said, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond. We're all so hopeful you can make a difference. Her tone implied the opposite. Dinner was served by silent staff. A perfectly roasted chicken, asparagus with hollandaise, wild rice pilaf. A feast. On Lily's plate, a tiny, medically approved portion was arranged with geometric precision. A few ounces of chicken, 3 spears of asparagus. Lily didn't touch it. She stared at it, her jaw clenched. The silence was deafening. Lawrence tried to talk about his day, but the words fell flat. Genevieve offered vapid pleasantries about an upcoming charity gala. Audrey, feeling the immense pressure to do her job, tried to engage Lily. Your room has a balcony, just like mine, Audrey said, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. The roses in the garden are incredible. Do you know what kind they are? Lily just shook her head, her eyes fixed on her plate. They're Queen Elizabeth roses, Genevieve supplied, dabbing her lips with a napkin. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, planted them. She had a passion for gardening. A pity Lily didn't inherit it. The comment was a dagger, expertly thrown and smoothly delivered. Lily visibly shrank in her chair. Lawrence shot his wife a look of pure fury, a silent, vicious battle waged across the polished wood. This was the dynamic. A desperate father, a fragile daughter, and a stepmother who wielded pleasantries like weapons. Audrey was supposed to walk through this minefield and somehow lead Lily to safety. It felt impossible. The next few days unfolded in a similar pattern of strained silence and suffocating luxury. Audrey tried everything she could think of. She tried talking about books, movies, music. She tried inviting Lily for a walk, a swim, to watch a film in the home theatre. Every attempt was met with a quiet, polite refusal or a simple shake of the head. Lily spent most of her time in her room, the door closed. Audrey ate her meals alone in the grand dining room or in her suite, feeling more isolated than she ever had in her tiny, noisy apartment. The Golden Cage had beautiful bars, but they were bars nonetheless. Genevieve, meanwhile, was a constant, smiling threat. She would happen to run into Audrey in the hall, offering unhelpful advice disguised as support. "You mustn't push her, Audrey. She's very sensitive. The professionals say it's a marathon, not a sprint," she'd say, her eyes communicating that Audrey was an amateur who was in way over her head. One afternoon, about a week into her stay, Audrey felt a pang of desperation. She was failing. She was collecting an astronomical salary for doing nothing. Leo's medical bills were being paid, but she was earning that money under false pretenses. She knocked on Lily's door. There was no answer. On impulse, she tried the handle. It was unlocked. The room was as pristine and impersonal as the rest of the house, except for one corner. There, on a small table, were several sketchbooks and a set of high-quality drawing pencils. Lily wasn't there. Audrey walked over, her curiosity piqued. She opened the top sketchbook. The first few pages were filled with breathtakingly detailed, realistic drawings of flowers, insects, and birds. The girl had talent, a keen eye for the delicate beauty of the natural world. But as Audrey turned the pages, the drawings became darker. The flowers wilted, their petals turning to dust. The birds became skeletal, their feathers falling away. The last dozen pages were terrifying. They were drawings of a girl, thin and fading, trapped behind bars made of measuring tape. A girl being crushed under a pile of giant, perfect-looking apples. A girl with a mouth sewn shut, her eyes wide with silent screams. Audrey felt a wave of nausea. This was Lily's voice. This was her diary, written in graphite and shadow. She heard a gasp from the doorway. Lily was standing there, her face white with shock and violation. In her hands, she held a small watering can. "Get out!" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "Lily, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Get out!" This time it was a scream, a raw, ragged sound that tore through the silent house. She threw the watering can. It clattered against the wall, water splashing across the expensive carpet. Audrey backed out of the room, her heart hammering. She had shattered the one tiny sliver of potential trust she might have had. Lily slammed the door shut, and Audrey heard the lock click. Then, the sound of heartbreaking, gut-wrenching sobs. Audrey leaned against the wall in the hallway, her own eyes filling with tears. She wasn't helping. She was making things worse. Maybe Genevieve was right. Maybe she was just a foolish waitress who was completely out of her depth. She retreated to her own room, defeated. As she sat on her balcony, staring at the perfect manicured garden, she noticed something she hadn't before. Tucked away behind the main greenhouse was a smaller, forgotten-looking structure. Its glass panes were grimy, and weeds grew thick around its foundation. It looked neglected, abandoned. It reminded her of Lily. An idea, fragile but insistent, began to form in her mind. It was a long shot. After the disaster with the sketchbook, it was probably a fantasy, but it was the only idea she had left. It wasn't about talking. It wasn't about food. It was about bringing something dead back to life. The next morning, Audrey didn't knock on Lily's door. She went down to the kitchen, a place she had so far avoided, feeling like an intruder. The head chef, a burly man named Antoine, who was surprisingly good-natured, was surprised to see her. "Miss Bell, you need something?" "I do, Antoine. I need a spade, a trowel, and some gardening gloves. And I need you to tell me where I can find the old potting shed." Armed with rusty tools and a new sense of purpose, Audrey marched to the forgotten glass house at the edge of the property. Up close, it was even sadder. The door hung off one hinge, and inside, dust lay thick on rotting benches and shattered clay pots. But the structure was sound, and the light that filtered through the dirty glass was soft and promising. She spent the entire day working. She swept out the debris, scrubbed the glass panes, pulled up the weeds, and tilled the dry, compacted earth in the raised beds. It was back-breaking, filthy work. Her designer clothes were ruined, her nails were broken, and her muscles screamed in protest. But it felt good. It felt real. It was the first honest day's work she'd done since she arrived. She didn't see Lily at all. She skipped lunch and worked until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. As she was gathering her tools, a small figure appeared at the edge of the trees. It was Lily. She stood half-hidden by the trunk of an oak, watching. She didn't approach, she just watched, her expression unreadable. Then, as silently as she appeared, she was gone. The next day, Audrey did the same thing, and the day after that. She found a nursery that delivered, and she ordered bags of rich organic soil, compost, and trays of seedlings, not flowers. She ordered herbs, rosemary, thyme, basil, mint, and vegetables, tomatoes, zucchini, snap peas, things that grew, that produced, that gave back. On the fourth day, as Audrey was carefully transplanting a row of young basil plants, she felt a presence behind her. She turned. Lily was standing just inside the greenhouse door, her arms wrapped around her thin frame. They stood in silence for a long moment. Audrey didn't push, didn't prompt. She just went back to her work, her movements slow and deliberate. "What are you doing?" Lily's voice was quiet, tentative. "I'm building a garden," Audrey replied simply, not looking up. This place looked like it needed one. Lily took a hesitant step further inside. "That was my grandmother's greenhouse. Her name was Eleanor." "I know," Audrey said softly. Genevieve mentioned she loved to garden. Lily flinched at the name, but didn't retreat. She drifted closer, her eyes scanning the neat rows of seedlings. She grew medicinal herbs, chamomile for sleep, echinacea for colds. She made teas. "She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was," Lily whispered. A pause. "She died 2 years ago." And there it was, the timeline. Grandmother Eleanor dies. 11 months later, Lily stops eating. The connection was a bright, painful flare. The loss of her anchor, her safe harbor. "The basil is crooked," Lily said suddenly, pointing a slender finger. Audrey looked. It was. She smiled. "You have a good eye. Want to fix it?" Lily hesitated. It was a pivotal moment. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Then, slowly, she knelt down. Her long, pale fingers, the same fingers that drew such beautiful and terrifying things, gently reached into the soil. She straightened the tiny plant, her touch surprisingly sure and steady. It was a a seed of trust planted in the dark, rich earth. From that day on, the greenhouse became their sanctuary. They didn't talk about food or weight or therapy. They talked about soil pH and aphid control. They talked about the difference between determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. Lily, it turned out, had inherited her grandmother's knowledge. She had a deep, instinctual understanding of the living world. For the first time since Audrey arrived, she saw a spark of light in Lily's eyes. A genuine smile touched her lips when a new shoot broke through the soil. She started spending more time out of her room, not just in the greenhouse, but walking the grounds, observing, sketching the things that grew there. One afternoon, they were sitting on a bench inside the warm, humid greenhouse, the air smelling of damp earth and new leaves. "I miss her," Lily said out of the blue, her voice thick. After she was gone, everything got so loud. Genevieve was always redecorating, changing things, making things better. The word better was laced with a decade of resentment. She said Mom's style was dated. She replaced all her furniture, even her favorite chair. Audrey listened, her heart aching for the girl. Genevieve hadn't just moved into a house, she had systematically erased the woman who came before her. And my dad, he just let her. He was so busy, so sad. He just wanted everything to be quiet. So I got quiet, too. This was the root of it all. The anorexia wasn't just about control. It was a silent, desperate protest. It was a hunger strike against the erasure of her mother, against her father's grief-stricken neglect, against the suffocating perfection of her stepmother. By refusing to eat, by shrinking, she was refusing to participate in the new world Genevieve had built. She was trying to disappear, just like her mother's memory had. Their progress was not lost on Lawrence. He would watch them from his study window, the stern lines of his face softening. He began leaving his study to join them for dinner, and while Lily still ate very little, she would stay at the table, sometimes even joining the conversation if it was about the garden. Genevieve, however, saw the bond between Audrey and Lily not as a victory, but as a threat. Her smiles became tighter, her veiled comments sharper. She began to subtly undermine their work. "Darling, you've been out in the sun all day. You must be exhausted," she'd say to Lily, steering her away from the greenhouse. "Let Audrey handle the dirty work. That's what she's paid for." One evening, Audrey found a bag of organic, all-natural pesticide in the greenhouse, left with a cheerful note from Genevieve. A quick search on her phone revealed it was highly toxic to the beneficial insects they had been trying to cultivate. She threw it out, a cold feeling creeping up her spine. It was sabotage, cloaked in helpfulness. The real twist, the one that turned the whole situation from a family drama into something far more sinister, came by accident. Lily had been complaining of stomach cramps and headaches for a few days. Genevieve was quick to fuss over her, bringing her special, calming teas and nutrient-dense wellness shakes that she insisted her own private nutritionist had formulated. "It's just part of the refeeding process," Genevieve explained to a worried Lawrence. "Her system is in shock. This will help settle it." Audrey was suspicious. The symptoms didn't seem right. One afternoon, she went to Lily's room with a book on heritage roses they had ordered. Lily was asleep, looking pale and unwell. A half-finished glass of Genevieve's murky green wellness shake was on her bedside table. On impulse, Audrey picked it up. It smelled strange, bitter beneath a cloying sweetness. She took the glass, intending to wash it out. But as she walked through Lily's ensuite bathroom, she noticed the wastebasket. It was filled with tissues. Tucked amongst them was a small, foil blister pack. Empty. Audrey's blood ran cold. She pulled it out. The label was in German, but the chemical name was clear enough for a quick internet search. It was a powerful diuretic, a water pill, often abused by people with eating disorders to create the illusion of weight loss. But there was another, more dangerous side effect. When combined with malnutrition, it caused severe cramping, headaches, and electrolyte imbalance, potentially leading to heart failure. But Lily wouldn't have bought this. She was trying to get better. Her focus was on the garden, on life. So who had? Audrey's mind raced back to Genevieve's constant fussing, her special shakes and teas, the perfect delivery system. Genevieve wasn't just subtly undermining Lily's confidence. She was actively, secretly poisoning her. She was keeping her sick. But why? To what end? Was it just a twisted need for control? To prove that Audrey's folksy methods were failing, and that only she, Genevieve, knew what was best for Lily? It seemed monstrous, unbelievable. Audrey knew she couldn't go to Lawrence with just a suspicion and an empty pill packet. Genevieve would deny it, twist it, and paint Audrey as a hysterical, troublemaking employee. She'd be fired, and Lily would be left alone with her tormentor. She needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof. That night, Audrey couldn't sleep. She looked at the family she was embedded in, a father blinded by hope, a daughter fighting for her life, and a stepmother who was a smiling, beautiful monster. The golden cage had become a viper pit, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The simple act of kindness in a restaurant had led her here, to a secret so dark it could not only destroy the Davenport family, but could also cost Lily her life. The discovery of the diuretic pills shifted the world beneath Audrey's feet. The luxurious estate was no longer a gilded cage. It felt like a crime scene in slow motion. Every smile from Genevieve was a threat, every wellness shake a potential weapon. Audrey knew she couldn't approach Lawrence with a mere suspicion and an empty pill packet. Genevieve's denial would be swift and convincing, and Audrey would be dismissed as a hysterical troublemaker, leaving Lily alone with her tormentor. She needed undeniable proof. Her one potential ally was Antoine, the head chef. She approached him in the kitchen early the next morning, her voice low and urgent. She didn't reveal the full, horrifying scope of her theory, only that she feared Genevieve was adding something harmful to Lily's drinks and needed his help to get a sample. Antoine, who had witnessed Genevieve's cold manipulations for years and had seen the genuine light return to Lily's eyes since Audrey's arrival, didn't hesitate. His jovial face hardened with resolve. "That woman has ice in her veins," he said. "Tell me what you need." The plan was simple and dangerously reliant on timing. When Genevieve next prepared a shake, Antoine would create a major distraction to lure her from the small pantry where she kept her private supplements. That would be Audrey's window. 2 days later, the opportunity arose. After a morning in the greenhouse, Lily mentioned feeling dizzy, and Genevieve immediately insisted on making her an energy-boosting drink. As Genevieve swept into the kitchen, Audrey sent Antoine a single-word text. "Now." Just as Genevieve entered the pantry, Antoine burst from his station, his voice a theatrical boom of panic. "Madame Davenport, the turbot delivery, it is a catastrophe. You must see this." Annoyed, Genevieve snapped, "Honestly, can no one handle anything?" and hurried out, leaving the pantry door ajar. Adrenaline surged through Audrey. She slipped from her seat in the breakfast nook, phone already recording. Inside the pantry, the blender sat next to a small, unmarked canister. Heart pounding, Audrey filmed as she opened it, revealing a fine white powder. She quickly scooped a small amount into a plastic baggie, sealed it, and pocketed it. She was back in her seat, phone hidden, seconds before Genevieve returned, muttering about incompetent fishmongers. Audrey watched with a churning stomach as Genevieve added a scoop of the white powder to the blender and served the finished drink to Lily with a triumphant smile. That afternoon, feigning an urgent errand, Audrey took the sample to a private lab in the city, paying a steep fee for a rush analysis. The next 24 hours were agonizing. The lab report, delivered via a secure email, confirmed her worst fears. The powder was a toxic cocktail of potent diuretics, laxatives, and, most horrifyingly, trace amounts of an appetite suppressant that had been banned by the FDA for causing severe psychiatric side effects. Genevieve wasn't just keeping Lily sick. She was methodically drugging her with a formula designed to mimic a worsening eating disorder while simultaneously attacking her mental state. Armed with the damning report, Audrey walked directly to Lawrence's study and entered without knocking. He was on a call, but the look on her face made him hang up mid-sentence. "What is it?" he asked, standing. "Is it Lily?" "Lily is why I'm here," Audrey said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She closed the heavy doors and laid out the entire sequence of events. The discovery, the plan with Antoine, the video on her phone, and finally, the lab report, which she placed on his desk. Lawrence's powerful composure disintegrated as he read. The blood drained from his face, leaving a grey, ashen pallor. His eyes fixed on the chemical name of the banned suppressant, and a flicker of distant, horrified recognition crossed his features. This is what they gave my sister," he whispered, the words choked with a grief she didn't understand. At that exact moment, the study doors opened, and Genevieve swept in. "Lawrence, darling, I was just—" Her smile vanished as she took in the scene. Her husband's devastated face, the official report on his desk, the cold fury in Audrey's eyes. "What is going on?" Lawrence rose, his frame infused with a terrifying cold rage. He held up the lab report. "I know what you've been putting in Lily's drinks, Genevieve." The color fled her face, but she recovered with a scoff. "What has she been telling you? This waitress? You'd believe her over your own wife? I have done nothing but love that girl." "Love?" Lawrence roared, slamming the report on the desk with a sound like a gunshot. "You call this love? A banned drug? The same one that almost killed my sister. You weren't helping her. You were poisoning her." The accusation, so specific and undeniable, shattered Genevieve's facade completely. Her carefully constructed elegance dissolved into venom. "You want to know why?" she shrieked, her voice shrill with fury. "Because she is a constant reminder of her, of Eleanor. This house, her garden, her face in that girl. You never once looked at me the way you looked at your perfect dead wife." The ugliest truth came last, spat out with pure greed. And what about the trust? Eleanor's precious trust fund, the one Lily only gets if she's physically and mentally sound. If she remains unwell, her guardian manages it. We would manage it. Millions, Lawrence. I was securing our future from that spoiled, ungrateful child. The confession, raw and monstrous, hung in the air. Lawrence stared at her, his expression one of utter revulsion. He turned his back on her, a final, complete dismissal. "Get out," he said, his voice a low growl. "What?" she gasped. "Get out of my house. My security will escort you. My lawyers will be in touch." Genevieve shot Audrey a look of pure hatred, a silent promise of retribution, before turning on her heel and storming from the room. In the ringing silence, Lawrence sank into his chair, the powerful titan of industry gone, replaced by a broken man. Audrey stood frozen, her heart aching for the wreckage around her. She had come to help a girl eat again, but instead she had unearthed a darkness that had just brought the entire house of Davenport crashing down. In the months that followed, the silence in the Davenport estate transformed from sterile and tense to peaceful and healing. With Genevieve gone, a shadow was lifted. Lawrence, humbled and devoted, threw himself into his daughter's recovery, not with doctors and protocols, but with time and presence. He and Lily started talking, truly talking, for the first time in years. They found their way back to each other, not in the grand dining room, but in the small greenhouse, surrounded by the life that Audrey and Lily had nurtured. Audrey's role shifted from companion to friend, to an irreplaceable part of their small, healing family. Her brother Leo's treatments, fully funded and using cutting-edge therapies, were a miraculous success, and for the first time his prognosis was bright. Audrey's act of kindness didn't just save Lily, it saved her own family too. Her life was forever changed, not by the money, but by the purpose she had found. Lawrence, wanting to create a legacy of meaning from the wreckage of his life, established the Eleanor Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing holistic, compassionate support for young people with eating disorders. He asked Audrey not to be an employee, but to run it. She had found her calling. It wasn't just about making someone eat, it was about feeding the soul. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Stories of compassion and courage are more important than ever. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell, so you won't miss our next real-life drama that proves one person can truly make a world of difference. Thank you for listening.